All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So today we've got a stack of personal logs that are, well, they read like a collision between a technical manual and a psychological thriller.
That's a good way to put it.
We are looking at the files of Lieutenant Commander Elias Harlan.
Mm.
And, usually when we look at Starfleet officers, we're looking at the best of the best. The flagships, the heroes.
Right, the shiny posters on the recruitment wall, the people who quote Shakespeare while the ship is, exploding around them.
Exactly. But this guy, Elias Harlan, he is messy. I mean, his service record is just all over the place. He's brilliant, no question, but he seems basically unpromotable.
He's the guy who fixes the engine while kind of insulting the admiral who ordered it fixed in the first place.
Yeah, that's the vibe. But what makes these logs from late 24-25 so compelling isn't just his personality. It's the backdrop. We really have to talk about where the Federation is at this point in history, because it is not the utopia you might be used to.
No, not at all. And that context is so crucial for understanding Elias. By 24-25, the Federation is just exhausted. You have to remember the timeline here.
Okay.
They survived the Dominion War, which was absolutely brutal, and it stripped away that feeling of invincibility. Then, in 2385, the Utopia Planitia shipyards on Mars destroyed.
The burning of Mars, that was the synth attack.
Right. And that wasn't just about losing a few ships. That was like an institutional lobotomy. When those yards burned, the Federation lost its master shipwrights, the generational designers, the people who knew the art of building starships, not just the science.
But we're not seeing those massive, luxury liners of the stars anymore. The Galaxy class, the Odysseys, that was a golden age. That is, for all intents and purposes, over.
It's over. Starfleet is stretched thin. They've lost the ability to mass produce the really high-tech stuff. So what do? They go to the boneyards. They pull out the old, reliable hull ships built 60, 80 years ago, refit them, and send them back out.
Which brings us right to the setting of this whole drama. The USS Intrepid. It's an Excelsior-class refit. And Elias, well, he had some very specific, very colorful thoughts about this particular ship.
He respects it, but he calls it a brick.
Boxy, thick, built like a brick. He even compares it to a B-52 bomber from ancient Earth. I actually looked this up. The B-52 flew for something like 100 years.
It's a perfect analogy. The Excelsior class really is the B-52 of Starfleet. It's not elegant. It's not going to win a beauty contest against a sovereign class, but it works.
It's the Toyota Camry of the fleet.
It just keeps going. And for a fleet that is terrified of losing more ships, it just keeps going. Is the most valuable trait a ship can have.
But for Elias, being on this particular ship is complicated, because the executive officer, the second in command, is Commander Rebecca Harlan, Becky, his sister.
The golden child.
And the dynamic here is, I mean, it's almost painful to read sometimes. You've got Elias, the black sheep, who can't keep a rank. He just bounces from post to post.
And then there's Becky, who's been on one ship her whole career, climbed the ladder perfectly, and now she runs the place.
He calls the ship Becky's floating merit badge.
There's love there, though. I mean, it's not a rivalry where they hate each other. She gets him the good coffee. She clears the transporter room for him so he doesn't have to deal with crowds. But Elias feels like a guest who's about to break the fine china. He is so insecure around her stability.
It's that feeling of being the screw-up sibling, right? Even if she's nice to him, her success just kind of highlights what he sees as his own failure.
Precisely. He's projecting all his own self-loathing onto the bulkheads.
So he's just hitching a ride. He's supposed to be a passenger on his way to his new job on the USS Arawyn.
Supposed to be. Just a quiet transit. Keep his head down. Don't get court-martialed for 2 weeks. But Elias, he has a way of attracting chaos. And it starts, interestingly, with the captain of the Intrepid, Alistair Harrington.
I was totally expecting Harrington to be the antagonist here. The by-the-book captain who hates the rogue engineer.
That's the classic trope.
But he's not that at all.
Not at all. And this goes right back to the state of the fleet we were talking about. In a time when ships are breaking down and resources are scarce, you don't need a captain who quotes the rule book. You need a captain who can keep the life support running.
Harrington has this one line that just stopped me in my tracks. Elias is expecting a dressing down, and Harrington just says, the book was written by people who weren't there when the plasma started Arxia.
That is the philosophy of survival right there. Harrington knows Elias's history. He knows he's a pain in the neck, that he argues with admirals, but he also knows Elias understands warp field geometry better than the people who wrote the regulations. He values the mechanic over the bureaucrat.
They even bond over coffee. Harrington is drinking Ractigino.
Klingon coffee, which is a really subtle character detail. It implies Harrington has spent time on the rugged edges of space. He's not a tea-sipping diplomat. He likes the strong stuff. He likes the burn.
So Elias thinks he's safe. He's got a cool captain. He's, tolerating his perfect sister. It's going to be an easy trip.
And then the universe decides to kick him in the teeth.
The Arawyn, his destination changes course.
It's now at Lathira IV, so the Intrepid has to divert to pick up the transfer crew. And Elias sees the transfer manifest.
And there's a name on it that makes him physically hide in a Jeffries tube. Dr. Jorik,
His ex-husband.
the Vulcan medical officer.
This shift in the logs is so jarring. We go from all this technical sarcasm and engineering metaphors to just raw, unfiltered panic. Elias literally hides in the maintenance shaft's auxiliary sensor labs just to avoid running into him.
Is that just drama?
Yeah.
Or is there something deeper? I mean, hiding in a tube for 3 days seems a little excessive.
Oh, it's trauma, pure and simple. When Jorik eventually finds him, and let's be honest, you can't hide from a Vulcan who understands probability and sensor grids, the conversation is devastating.
It's not a screaming match. It's worse. It's like a debate between logic and emotion.
Right. Jorik just hits him with the stats immediately. It has been 12 years, 3 months, and 14 days. He mentions he sent 25 messages, birthdays, anniversaries, that Elias ignored.
But Elias ignored them because he feels abandoned. The backstory here is rough. Elias was in a biobed, recovering from an attack by Orion pirates, literally stitched back together, and Jorik serves him with divorce papers. A dissolution, as he calls it.
And Elias sees that as just pure cruelty. He thinks Jorik treated their marriage like a xenopsychology experiment that he just got bored with. He thinks Jorik walked away when things got hard, but Jorik's perspective. That's the kicker. That's where the cultural divide just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, explain that to me. Because Jorik claims he did it to save himself.
To preserve dignity, Jorik watched Elias being reckless, constantly putting himself in danger, what we'd call a death wish. Jorik did the math. He calculated that watching Elias die by inches, watching himself destruct, would be illogical and damaging to his own well-being, so he chose logic over prolonged suffering.
He amputated the relationship to save the patient, and the patient was himself.
Exactly. He basically divorced Elias to save himself from the grief of watching Elias inevitably die.
That is just brutally logical and heartbreaking, because from Elias's point of view, his partner left him when he was at his most vulnerable.
It is, and Elias can't accept that logic. He just says, I chose survival, meaning he chose to cut Jorik off completely so he could function. There's no hug at the end of the scene. Jorik leaves, but the logs note a microtremor in Jorik's hand. Even the Vulcan is cracking.
So Elias is an emotional wreck. He's trapped on a ship with his ex who dumped him via logic, and his sister who's perfect. He needs an out. He needs a distraction. And weirdly, Captain Harrington hands him one, in the form of a physics problem.
And not just any physics problem. Harrington hands Elias a payday D with Elias's own Academy thesis on it. Title, Asymmetric Nacelle Field Modulation.
Catchy title, real page-turner.
A real mouthful, but the concept is fascinating. It goes back to the great experiment of the 2280s, the original USS Excelsior. The very first one was supposed to have a transwarp drive.
The great experiment. I remember this from history class. It failed, right? The ship just stalled out in front of the whole fleet.
Historically, yes. Starfleet scrapped the transwarp drive, said, nice try, and put in a standard engine. But Elias's thesis argued that the design wasn't the problem. He thought it was sabotage, or maybe just a lack of nerve. He believed the geometry of the Excelsior was meant to do transwarp.
And Harrington thinks he's right, or at the very least, he's bored enough to find out.
Well, more than that, Harrington reveals the Intrepid isn't a stock refit. It looks like an old clunker, but it's a sleeper.
I love this concept. It looks like a granddad station wagon, but under the hood.
Under the hood, it has structural shoring with titanium alloy, and this is the big one, variable geometry injectors coated in neutronium alloy.
Hold on, let's break that down for people who aren't warp theorists. Why is neutronium such a big deal?
Neutronium is, it's just impossibly dense. I mean, it's the stuff of collapsed stars. You don't use that for standard plumbing. You only use that if you are expecting to channel insane amounts of energy that would melt a normal ship. If the Intrepid has neutronium injectors, it wasn't built to patrol the border. It was built to scream.
So Harrington wants to test Elias's old theory. Use the main deflector to smooth the warp field, basically make the ship more aerodynamic in subspace, and then pump a ton of power through these special injectors.
Exactly. They decide to do it. 0900 hours, main engineering. It's Elias, Captain Harrington, and the chief engineer, Lyra Voss.
And the chief engineer, Lyra, she's just on board with this.
Oh, she's an engineer. You give an engineer a chance to break the speed limit, they're going to take it.
So the test starts, and at first it goes great. They're getting incredible efficiency. At warp 2 power settings, they're actually traveling at warp 2.5. It's like getting 100 miles to the gallon.
That alone proves Elias's theory that the Excelsior hull is aerodynamically superior for warp travel. But Harrington, being the mischief maker he is, pushes it. They go to emergency flank speed. They expect warp 9.5. They hit warp 9.89. The ship is vibrating like crazy, but it's holding.
And then they get greedy. They push 10% past the red line.
And that's when physics decides to hit back. Hard. The sensors show a subspace wall. Think of it like the sound barrier, but for reality itself. As they push against it, the energy has nowhere to go. It starts piling up in front of the ship.
The logs describe it as surfing a subspace shear wave, which sounds absolutely terrifying. They aren't flying through space anymore. They're falling through a hole. They just tore in it.
It's a critical failure state. The warp field is collapsing, but the ship is accelerating past warp 999. If that bubble collapses violently, the ship is just dust. They have seconds. Lyra, Voss, and Elias have to improvise fast.
What do? You can't just hit the brakes at that speed.
No, hitting the brakes would tear the ship apart. Lyra inverts the deflector, pushes out against the wave, while Elias manually slams the injector shut to starve the engine of power.
They're trying to bleed the pressure off without popping the balloon.
Exactly. And there's this sound. Elias describes it as a pop-like thunder, a massive displacement of air and energy, and then silence. They drop out of warp.
Everyone's alive. The ship is intact. But then Becky calls from the bridge. She sounds confused because they aren't where they're supposed to be.
Not even close. They started 5 light years away from Lathira IV. The test lasted maybe 3 minutes. When they check the sensors, they're in orbit of Lathira IV.
Wait, 5 light years usually takes what? A couple of days at high warp?
At least. They did it in minutes. They didn't just go fast. They achieved a stable transwarp jump. They essentially teleported across the sector.
So Elias was right. The Excelsior design could do it all along. The failure 140 years ago was just execution, not theory.
He vindicated the design, and he vindicated himself. In one morning, he went from the black sheep to the guy who solved a century-old engineering mystery.
Harrington's reaction is great. He basically just tells Elias, "You're welcome."
He does. He knew. Or at least he suspected. But think about the implications here. This is the big takeaway, I think. The Federation is broke. They can't build new, fancy ships. But Elias just proved that the old junk they have lying around.
The bricks. The B-52s.
Exactly. If you tune them right, if you add some neutronium and a really smart engineer, those old ships can outperform the modern fleet.
It changes the entire strategic map. You don't need 1,000 new ships if your old ones can, teleport.
It turns the biggest weakness of the Federation into an unexpected strength. It's a massive win for Starfleet.
And a massive win for Elias. He packs his bags for the Arawyn with his head held high. He solved the puzzle, but, and there's always a but with Elias,
the ghost is still there.
Jorik is on the Arawyn.
And that's the tragedy of the ending, isn't it? Elias proved he can master the laws of physics. He can survive a subspace shear. He can rewrite the textbook. But now he has to go do his job every single day next to the man who broke his heart with a logic puzzle.
That line from earlier, "I chose survival," it just comes right back around. He survived the test on the Intrepid. Now he has to survive the peace on the Arawyn.
And that's so much harder. Engineering has a checklist. If the core gets hot, you vent plasma. If the field collapses, you invert the deflector. There is no checklist for sitting in a mess hall across from your ex-husband who thinks he left you for your own good.
It sets up such a fascinating dynamic for his next chapter. He's walking onto that new ship with his head high professionally, but emotionally, he's walking right into a minefield.
It just reminds us that behind every great technical breakthrough you read about in the logs, there's usually a human being who is barely holding it all together.
The book versus the breach. Elias Harlan is definitely a man of the breach.
He is. And frankly, a broken Federation needs broken people to fix it. They're the only ones who know how the pieces fit back together.
That is a profound thought to leave us on. A huge thank you to the logs of Lieutenant Commander Harlan for this wild ride.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Until then, keep your deflectors modulated. And maybe call your ex. No, actually, don't do that.
Definitely don't do that.
Just keep the coffee black. Take care, everyone.